My name is Claire. And if you had told me 5 years ago that my own parents, the people who raised me, packed my school lunches, and cheered at my dance recitals would one day sue me for refusing to hand over my house to my younger sister, I would have laughed. But trust me, I'm not laughing now. They called me selfish, ungrateful, said I was tearing the family apart, all because I said no to giving away the one thing I'd worked for every day of my adult life. I didn't shout, I didn't cry. I just showed up in court with a folder in my hands and a quiet truth they never saw coming. What happened next didn't just change my relationship with them, it changed everything. Because for the first time in my life, I fought back. And this time, I fought for myself. I grew up in the kind of house that looked perfect from the outside. White shutters, a mowed lawn, Christmas lights in December, and birthday banners strung up every July. But perfection is a great mask. And behind that mask was a family with a very clear hierarchy in which I, the oldest daughter, was always second place. My sister, Elise, was the golden one, the delicate one, the one my parents said had a creative soul and couldn't handle pressure. So guess who handled the pressure for her? When Elise forgot her homework, I was the one blamed. When she cried about a lost recital ribbon, I gave up mine to make her feel better. I was praised for being strong and mature enough to understand. But strength, I learned, was just another word for, we expect you to carry it all. By high school, I knew exactly what role I played. Elise got the applause, the attention, the brand new car at 16. I got a used laptop and a pat on the back. When I got accepted into a good state university with a scholarship, they congratulated me with a card. When Elise got into an overpriced art school 2 years later, they threw her a party and covered her tuition despite the fact that she dropped out 6 months later. I never said anything. I didn't complain. I just kept my head down and worked. I took summer jobs and weekend shifts, saved every dollar I could. I wasn't chasing attention, I was chasing freedom. A space of my own. That space finally came when I was 28. After years of saving and skipping vacations, I closed on a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town. It wasn't fancy, but it had charm and, most importantly, it was mine. The first night I slept there on a mattress on the floor, I cried not because I was lonely, but because I had done it. Alone. My parents didn't offer to help. Elise didn't even text me. But I didn't care. I wasn't building a life for their approval anymore. At least, that's what I thought until the knock on the door came. It was a Sunday afternoon when they showed up uninvited, of course. I had just come in from planting tulip bulbs in the backyard, gloves still on my hands, dirt under my nails. I wasn't expecting anyone, but when I opened the door and saw my mum, dad, and Elise standing there, smiling too widely, I knew something was off. "Claire? Sweetheart?" Mom said, brushing past me like she owned the place. "We thought we'd drop by and see your new home." Dad followed with a nod and a half-hearted, "Looks cozy," while Elise stayed on the porch texting. I swallowed back the irritation. They hadn't even congratulated me when I bought the place, but now they wanted a tour? I showed them around anyway quickly. They complimented the kitchen cabinets, admired the natural light in the guest room, and made obligatory noises about how grown up everything felt. Then, just as I was about to suggest they head out, Mom cleared her throat. "We were hoping to talk, actually, as a family." My stomach dropped. Nothing good ever followed that phrase in our household. "We've been thinking," she began, glancing at Elise, who now looked up from her phone with a practiced look of vulnerability. "Elise has had a really rough year." "Here we go." "She's been couch hopping, and that apartment she tried to sublet turned out to be a scam," Dad added. "You know how hard the housing market is for someone in her position." I nodded slowly. "And?" "Well," Mom said, as if carefully choosing her words, "we were thinking maybe she could move in here, just for a while, Until she's back on her feet. I blinked. Excuse me? It's just temporary, Elise chimed in quickly, flashing a sugary smile. You have a whole extra bedroom you're not using, right? The audacity was staggering. I was still paying off the closing costs, still juggling contract work and side gigs to afford monthly expenses, and they were asking me to hand over part of my home to someone who had never worked a full-time job longer than 3 months. Elise, I said quietly, this is my home. I didn't buy it to be someone else's safety net. Mom's tone hardened instantly. Claire, don't be selfish. She's your sister. Family helps family. Funny. That only ever seemed to apply when I was the one giving. I'm sorry, I said, my voice tight. The answer is no. Their faces shifted all at once. Mum's smile disappeared. Dad looked like I'd just slapped him, and Elise muttered something under her breath. They left without another word, and I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. It started with a knock on my door 2 weeks later, except this time, no one was on the other side. Instead, there was a thick envelope resting on the welcome mat, the kind that screamed legal before I even picked it up. My name typed in bold letters across the front. Inside, I found a formal notice. Notice of civil property claim filed by my own parents. I stood there, heart racing, rereading it again and again, trying to make sense of what I was seeing. They were suing me for refusing to give Elise access to my house. Their argument? That because they had supported me emotionally and financially during my upbringing, they were entitled to shared interest in any property I acquired within a certain number of years after moving out. It was absurd. They weren't even hiding it. There was a clause that explicitly stated their intention to transfer primary use and residence rights to Elise Cooper, my sister, the golden daughter. I sat down hard on the couch, the envelope sliding to the floor. My hands were shaking, not because I was scared of losing, but because I couldn't believe it had come to this. My own family, turning against me in a courtroom over the only thing I had ever truly built for myself. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I did what I always do when I'm cornered. I got organized. I pulled out a binder I had been keeping since I first toured the house. Receipts from the inspections, renovation costs, loan approvals, even the paint samples I'd obsessed over for weeks. I collected emails showing I paid for everything myself, no co-signer, no loans from family. I even had the Venmo receipts from the 6-0 I once sent Elise when her business launch had gone under. Back then, it had felt like generosity. Now, it felt like evidence. I printed out texts, dozens of them of Elise begging me for help, asking for money, asking for just a little more time. I screenshotted her Instagram stories, the one where she posted a photo in front of my house, with the caption, "Manifesting my next move." My stomach had turned when I saw it then. Now it was just ammunition. I called a lawyer the next morning, Marla Gonzalez. Sharp, calm, and completely unfazed by the insanity of the case. Families can be like that, she said dryly, flipping through the documents I'd handed over, especially when they think silence equals permission. I nodded. I was done being silent. We spent the next 2 weeks preparing every inch of our case. Marla filed a countersuit for harassment and frivolous litigation. She drafted a protective order just in case Elise tried to enter the property. I filed it without hesitation. Then came the hearing date. I stood outside the courthouse on a grey Monday morning, my binder pressed to my chest, dressed in the same navy suit I wore to my job interview 3 years ago. Elise showed up in a designer coat she couldn't possibly afford on her own. My parents walked in like it was a family brunch. They smiled at me. I didn't smile back. Inside the courtroom, everything felt smaller than I imagined. No grand hall, no dramatic gavel slams. Just a modest room with beige walls and the quiet murmur of paperwork. My parents sat on the other side of the room beside Elise, their expressions calm, rehearsed. Elise had even curled her hair. I wondered if she thought this was going to be a performance. When the judge walked in, a woman in her 60s with a hard-set jaw and the kind of stare that could slice through excuses the room, fell silent. She called the case number. My full name. Elise's. And then I heard me parents listed as co-plaintiffs. That stung more than I expected. They weren't just supporting her emotionally. They were legally aligned against me. Their lawyer stood first. A man named Mitchell Crane, all tailored suit and oily charm. He opened with a speech about family values, legacy, and mutual expectations. He said my house had always been treated as a family investment, that my parents had provided the foundation of opportunity, and Elise was now seeking fairness after being left housing insecure. I wanted to laugh, but I didn't. Because what he was doing wasn't funny. It was weaponizing every good deed I'd done, every dinner I paid for, every emergency fund I lent, every "sure, I can help" that I'd whispered over the years because I was too exhausted to argue. They were framing my generosity as debt, my independence as ingratitude. Then it was our turn. Marla stood slowly. No theatrics, no raised voice, just facts. She laid out a timeline. The deed was in my name. The mortgage paid solely from my income. The renovations financed from my savings. She presented screenshots of text messages Elise calling me a lifesaver, promising to repay money she never did. She pulled out printed copies of Elise's social media captions. "The universe delivers when you deserve it," posted with a photo of my front porch. The judge flipped through the pages. She didn't nod, didn't smile, but she didn't interrupt either. Then came the best part. Marla placed a final envelope in front of the judge. Inside was a notarized statement from my former contractor, attesting that I had been the sole point of contact and financier of all home repairs down to the 800 garbage disposal Elise had once broken and never mentioned again. The judge looked up. "Do the plaintiffs have any written agreement, lease, or financial document tying them to the defendant's property?" Mitchell hesitated. "No, Your Honor." "But then you have no legal claim. This is a civil matter built on assumptions, not contracts. And this courtroom does not exist to untangle family resentments." Silence. I turned my head toward my parents. My mother's lips were pressed tight, her eyes darting away. My father sat still, pale and blank like a man watching a train he thought he controlled go off the rails. Elise was frozen, her mouth slightly parted. She had never planned for this moment, only the version where she walked out with keys in her hand and a new Instagram story to post. The judge leaned forward. "If the defendant wishes to pursue damages or a restraining order due to harassment or misuse of legal channels, the court will hear that." I didn't say anything. I didn't have to. Because the moment was already mine. The case was dismissed. Clean. Final. And in that breath of stillness, for the first time in years, I felt something lift off me. Not just their expectations, not just their control. Their version of me, the obedient one, the fallback daughter, the quiet caretaker, was gone, and I had no intention of ever bringing her back. I walked out of that courthouse without looking back. No dramatic exit, no stinging words, just the sound of my heels on the concrete steps and the thick folder of evidence still tucked under my arm. Marla caught up beside me and gave a small smile. "You did well in there." I nodded, still not quite feeling the moment. "Thanks," I said. "For everything." "You don't owe me thanks," she replied. "You just defended what was already yours." I got into my car and sat for a long while. The keys were in the ignition, but I didn't start it. I just stared at my hands, the same ones that once scrubbed grout lines at midnight, carried bags of mulch across the yard, and wired the new light fixtures in my hallway because I couldn't afford a contractor. These hands had built a life, and now, no one could argue that anymore. That evening, I went home. My home. The quiet was comforting, not lonely. I poured a glass of wine, lit a candle on the windowsill, and played the playlist I used to listen to when I was sanding cabinets during the renovation phase. The same music, the same walls, but it all felt different now. Sharper, real. Then, the messages started coming. Elise was first. A DM on Instagram. Just 2 words. I'm sorry. I stared at it for a second. Then I archived it. A day later, a longer email arrived. Subject line: please read. She explained that she'd been desperate, that she thought I'd understand, because I always had it together. She claimed our parents had pushed her into filing the suit, told her it was the only way she'd ever have stability. She ended the email with, I never meant for it to go this far. I didn't respond. Then my parents sent a letter, handwritten. My mother's cursive on expensive stationery. We only wanted the best for both our daughters. We hoped you would understand that family sometimes requires sacrifice. At the end, she wrote, let us know when you're ready to come back together. Love, Mom and Dad. Back together? As if they hadn't just dragged me through a lawsuit to strip me of the one thing I'd ever truly owned. I didn't shred the letter. I didn't burn it. I just folded it neatly and placed it in the same file I'd brought to court. Evidence. Again, but this time, not for a judge, for myself. Proof of where I'd come from and how far I'd climbed. The next few weeks were a blur of unexpected calm. I repainted the guest room a soft sage green, bought a second-hand piano, and relearned a few chords I hadn't touched since high school. I adopted a grey cat from the shelter and named him Jasper. He liked the windowsill and didn't need much, just warmth and quiet, like me. And somewhere in that stillness, I began to realize this wasn't just about a house. It never had been. It was never about the house. It was about space, control, ownership, not just of land and walls but of me. For years, I had been the dependable one, the bridge between everyone's chaos, the one who swallowed frustration so that Elise could scream hers, the one who always picked up, always gave in, always showed up. But not this time. And, still, a small voice inside me asked, what if they're right? What if I am selfish? I silenced it by looking around. At the walls I painted, the hardwood floors I refinished with my own 2 hands, the tiny crack in the hallway baseboard that reminded me of the week I worked overtime just to afford that sander. No, this wasn't selfishness. This was survival. Then came the local news. A small real estate site ran a human interest story. Woman wins case after parents attempt to claim her house. They never used our full names, but the facts were recognizable. The story spread faster than I imagined. Comments poured in, some sympathetic, some cruel, but one in particular made my breath catch. This happened to my cousin. Her parents sued her for control of her apartment after her brother lost his job. Family entitlement runs deeper than blood. I stared at the comment for a long time. That was it. Entitlement. That's what this had always been. My family believed that because they had once put food on my plate, they had earned lifetime access to everything I built for myself. As if parenting was a loan that required compound interest. They wanted access to my life without ever having invested in the person I had become. And I realized something else. My silence all those years hadn't made me noble. It had made me complicit. I had taught them, again and again, that I would never say no. That I would keep absorbing the cost, cleaning up the mess, shrinking to fit the frame they needed me to stay in. But not anymore. One quiet Saturday morning, I sat on the back porch with a cup of coffee, and the early sun warming my legs. Jasper purred beside me, and for the first time in years, I didn't check my phone out of anxiety. I didn't wait for the next disaster, the next demand, the next emotional ambush. I just sat there, still, present, mine, because I had chosen something radical. Peace over permission. And I was finally learning that peace doesn't come when others approve of your life. It comes when you stop needing them to. I thought the silence would be the end. But 2 weeks after the article made its rounds, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. No return address. Inside, a single handwritten note on thick cream paper. "We didn't mean for it to go that far. Please call us, Mom." There was no apology, no acknowledgement, just a vague plea that reeked of damage control, not remorse. I didn't call. 3 days later, Elise messaged me on Instagram. Just 3 words. "I miss you." That would have gutted me once. But now, it just made me tired. Miss me? She missed the sister who floated her when rent was due, who took the emotional hits for her, who gave and asked for nothing in return. So I replied with truth. "You miss the version of me that lets you walk over her. She's gone. She left me to read." And yet, it wasn't hatred I felt. It was a strange, almost painful clarity. I had always thought the hurt came from how little they gave. But now I understood it came from how much I had given without ever asking why they couldn't meet me halfway. One evening, as I walked past my bookshelf, I spotted the legal folder I'd taken to court. Something compelled me to open it again, not out of anger, but reflection. I reread the texts, the receipts, the timeline I'd carefully assembled like armor. I saw it now as a roadmap not just of the lawsuit, but of years I'd spent proving my worth to people who were never really looking. Then I added a new page, just a handwritten note. This is the boundary that changed everything. This is where I stopped asking to be chosen, and chose myself instead. I closed the file, slipped it back onto the shelf, and exhaled like I was shedding an entire past life. It wasn't just about saying no to them. It was about saying yes to dignity, to identity, to finally own not just a house, but my history. And I swore to myself, I would never again shrink to be palatable to people who couldn't stomach my strength. Months passed. Spring crept into my garden like a quiet apology. I planted lavender near the front walk, painted the shutters a bold shade of navy, and adopted a rescue dog named Miloa, wiry little terrier who barked at squirrels and slept with his chin on my ankle. I didn't think much about Elise anymore, or my parents. They existed now more as old photographs, though faded, at the edges, still, and out of reach. Then one Sunday morning, as I sipped my coffee on the porch, a car pulled up outside. Elise stepped out, alone. No makeup, no polished smile, just her, holding a thin envelope. She walked up the path slowly and offered it without a word. Inside, a check for 50 and a note for what I borrowed. I know it doesn't fix anything, but maybe it's a start. I looked at her. She looked exhausted not from lack of sleep, but from the weight of finally facing something real. "I'm not here to ask for anything," she said softly. "Not a relationship, not forgiveness. I just wanted you to know I finally see it. What I was, what they let me be." There was a silence so wide it could have swallowed us. I nodded once. "I don't hate you," I said. "But I'm not coming back either. Not to that version of us." She blinked quickly, then nodded too. "I wouldn't ask you to." And just like that, she turned and left. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't ache. I felt clear. I didn't cash the check. I tucked it into the same folder I'd once brought to court. A symbol not of repayment, but of recognition. And that mattered more. Years from now, if someone asks me how I knew I'd healed, I'll point to that day. Not because Elise showed up, but because I didn't need her to. Because I had already come home. To myself. To a life that was mine alone. Not earned through pleasing or silence, but through choosing every single day to honor my own worth. My parents once called me selfish for defending what I built. But the truth? It was the first truly selfless thing I'd ever done for the version of Claire who finally said, "This is mine, and I don't owe it to anyone." Ask ChatGPT.